Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we're going to be covering mind calming, also known as meditation, some of the tips and tricks that I have learned along the way, and also how it can be really useful for your magical practice. Mind calming is a term that I personally use to describe the techniques that are found within spellwork and ritual practice to assist in calming and stilling the mind before spellwork and ritual. Many books and many people will refer to this as meditation. Now, I personally tend to split them apart because meditation is a much larger topic that covers other aspects of practice other than the mind calming that you will often find done before spellwork and ritual. But a lot of websites, people, textbooks will refer to them as being one and the same. So if you want to research it further, meditation might be the term that you're after. But during this video, I'm going to call it mind calming because it's a really good description of what this technique is actually used for spellwork and ritual. Now, a lot of people really struggle with mind calming. It's something that people find really, really difficult depending on their personal circumstances and the way their mind works. I am one of these people. So today, let's talk about some tips and tricks for mind calming, some alternative techniques, and why it's so important. Because let's face it, every single book and almost every single person recommends mind calming and meditation for a beginner practitioner. But how on earth do you do it? Why is it important? These are all things, hopefully, I can cover today. So first things first, let's answer the basic question. What is mind calming? Mind calming is a form of meditative practice that allows you to still and quieten your mind. Now, what a lot of people seem to believe is that mind calming in meditation is designed to give you a blank slate. You're not meant to think of anything. You're not meant to focus on anything. Your mind is meant to be just this black hole. But the problem is that that's almost impossible for most people to achieve, which is why I refer to this technique as mind calming instead of mind clearing, because to completely remove conscious thought is a very, very difficult task for a lot of people. So our goal when it comes to stilling the mind is to quieten the thoughts, not to erase them. Now, this is a technique that is developed over time. Most people aren't going to achieve it on their first, second, even their third attempt. It can take days, weeks, months in order to master this technique, and you'll often find those practitioners that focus primarily on meditation will be undertaking their practice for decades. There are people that are still developing their meditative skills after 50 plus years. And so it's a very, very large topic that people can really spend decades of their life mastering. But as a magical practitioner, you don't have to spend 10 years practicing meditation. But I would recommend spending periods of time every day or every week trying to practice these mind calming techniques because they can really help improve your magical practice in the long run if you do want to go on to doing spell work and ritual, if you want to enter into trance states, and if you do want to practice astral projection, and also it can help with lucid dreaming as well. So why are mind calming techniques and meditations really significant when it comes to magical practice? The mind calming techniques themselves aren't going to help you become a master magician. They aren't going to help you become the best witch in the entire world. But what they can help you do is quieten the thoughts that are going to distract you from your working. And that's the main purpose of mind calming when it comes to spellwork and ritual. You want to open yourself up to being more accessible to spirit communication. You want to allow yourself to be more accessible to divine communication if you do work with deities. You're opening yourself up to easier access to spiritual planes through the use of astral projection. You're assisting yourself in trance work, and you're also allowing your mind to focus on what it is you want to achieve during spellwork and ritual without it being cluttered by all of these invading thoughts that we often have all day, every day. This then allows us to focus on our visualizations, to focus on our affirmations, to focus on what we are doing actively in the moment when it comes to spellwork and ritual, which is really, really important. When you're doing spellwork and ritual, you'll often be in a quiet space. You're probably going to be alone if you're solitary. There will likely be dim lighting, maybe quiet music or no sound at all. You're going to want to lock other people out of the rooms to make sure that you are solitary, that you can focus on what you're doing without distraction. But you can do all of that in the physical world, But if your mind is going, what am I going to give the kids for breakfast tomorrow morning? Oh my God, I have a deadline tomorrow. Do I have to wake up at 8 or 7 tomorrow morning? That then is going to be invading your spell work and ritual, just like a child running in, just like a cat knocking over a candle, just like your husband asking you what is going to be for tea tonight. These mental intrusions are also going to negatively impact your spell work and ritual. And so mind calming is a really fantastic technique. So how do you undertake mind calming? I think a lot of people assume that when it comes to meditative practices, it's about the complete removal of thought from your mind. And this can be really difficult to work around because realistically, we have things going on in our lives. We have things that we are thinking about. And if we are thinking about things and things are happening all day, every day, it can be really difficult to completely block them out. Now, there are a lot of people that practice meditation that maybe are capable of pushing out every waking conscious thought and allowing themselves to be in this almost void where creativity, divine inspiration, and communion with ancestors and spirits is really easily accessible. But for most of us, we have other things present in our lives that are going to stop us from reaching that perfect state of quietness. But what we can do is try to quieten our minds and still them as much as possible. So the goal here isn't to lock everything outside of your mind. That isn't going to be accessible for a lot of people to do. What we do want to do, however, is to allow the thoughts and emotions to pass us by without notice. So this is the way I was personally taught to do these mind calming techniques during group work, and I have never had more success until I learned this particular technique. So how I was taught to view it is that our memories, our thoughts, our emotions are all TV screens on conveyor belts. There's hundreds of them stretching back in our minds. And every waking minute of the day, these TV screens are passing and they're playing things that we need to remember, things that we are focusing on, memories, intrusive thoughts, things that clutter up our mind. They're just whizzing past us every waking minute of the day. And the problem lies is when you're doing spell work and ritual, if you're partway through doing some trance work and the back of your mind, you suddenly hear, do I need to get up at 7 or 8 in the morning? That is then a distraction from the working. So what ultimately happens is we have all of these thoughts passing by us every waking minute of the day, and sometimes you have a giant screen. I mean like cinema, movie theatre screen, and it stops right in front of us, and it's all we can focus on. I think we've all known this feeling. You'll be reading a book, and all of a sudden you'll go, shit, I have a deadline, it has to be in at 4 o'clock tomorrow, and then it becomes all you can think about. Those are the big movie screens, the things that really distract you from what you're focusing on. Now, the goal when it comes to mind calming isn't to completely remove these thoughts. It's not to get rid of every single TV screen in the entire room. Instead, it is to stop focusing on them. You're going to allow these thoughts, these emotions to pass by you, and you are not going to acknowledge them. You're not going to focus on them. You're not going to try to force them out. You're just going to let them float past without a thought about them. And this is one of the biggest things that I think people get stuck on when it comes to meditation, is meditation isn't a forced practice. You can't force yourself into a meditative or a mind-calming space, because the action of forcing is going to distract you from entering into that mind-calming space. And so instead, you need to allow things to pass you by. So much like how if you have a person that focuses on every little tiny detail, they are so detail focused, they are so certain that they need to control everything in their life, these kind of people will often be very tight and on edge all of the time. I know this because I am one of these people. And then you also get people that allow life to just kind of flow by them. They're go with the flow kind of people. You'll often find they're very relaxed, very chill is the word that they often use to describe themselves. What your mind needs to be is this chill person. You need to be allowing these thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories to just wash over you, wash through you and out the other side. You can't be one of these people that focuses on every little detail trying to push it out, because it's your mind. Your mind is always going to be functioning. It's always thinking, it's always processing. And because of that, pushing everything out is an almost impossible task, and you're going to leave yourself more frustrated than you are calm, because you basically can't push every thought out of your mind. But what you can do is let it pass you by. Now, I've tried a lot of techniques for mind calming over the years because I have typically really struggled with it. Now, I'm going to be going over a few different techniques here, but please note that not all of these techniques are going to work for everyone. Different people are going to have to use different techniques. So if none of these work well for you, then I would recommend going online and seeing if you can find some other techniques that are recommended by other people and try those out as well. No one style is going to suit everyone. So it's like a shoe shop. Try a bunch. If they don't work, don't get disheartened. Simply allow yourself to move on and find something else that is going to work better for you. So before we get into the techniques, I'm just going to cover a few tips and tricks that I have found to be exceptionally useful when it comes to mind calming. The first is to make sure that you aren't going to be disturbed. If you have a sense of worry that someone is about to walk into that room while you're attempting to enter this calm state, you aren't going to be able to get into that calm state because your worry is going to overtake everything else. So make sure that you are alone or in private or in a comfortable place where you don't feel stressed or uncomfortable. So that also changes your seating position. You don't have to be sitting cross-legged on the floor in a really uncomfortable place. This is also not accessible for people with mobility issues, and so I think it's really important to note that you don't have to be sitting in a really uncomfortable cross-legged position on the floor. You can just be sitting on the sofa, you can be lying in a bed, you can be sitting on the floor, you can be lying face down if that is the most comfortable, you can be lying on your side. The main thing is that you need it to be comfortable long term. So for me, I find sitting with my head leaning back against a cushion is the best way to do it, because I can't sit on the floor without my legs going dead. So you have to really play around with it, see what works. If lying down makes you fall asleep, maybe try sitting propped up. If you don't like sitting on sofas, maybe try sitting on the floor. Just trial and error different places, because everyone is going to be different. If I sat on the floor, I would be so unbelievably uncomfortable because my legs would go dead in like 0.2 seconds. Another tip is to play around with different scents, different noises, different music, just to see what works best for you. A lot of people will use programming techniques. Now, the idea behind this is that if you repeat the same action with a stimulus at the same time, you'll often find that your brain automatically has an easier time entering into that practice when the stimulus is present. It's a little bit about Pavlov and his dogs. If you know that entire process, then you know what I'm getting at. But the basis behind this is that if you burn the same incense, or you light the same candle, or you drink the same tea, before you attempt these mind-calming exercises, over time, your mind will immediately know that when you light that incense stick, we are going to be entering into a mind-calming technique. And over time, this can really assist in improving how quickly you can get into this state. Now, the idea between Pavlov and the dogs was that every time he fed the dogs, he would ring a bell. And it got to the point where the dogs would automatically know that food was coming because the bell had been rung, even if food wasn't present within that space. The same thing happens to your mind. It's a really common technique that people use. So I personally use this for reading. If I'm reading an educational material that I need to remember in depth, I will light an incense stick and a candle just before I start reading, and I'll also put the same track of music on before I start reading, and that way my brain immediately knows, okay, it's time to focus now. Now, you can use the same technique when it comes to study as well. If you are struggling to focus when you're studying, this technique can really work as well. Now, you don't have to use it, but if you do want to get into these mind-calming states quite quickly, and if you do find that repeated action really works for you, then try it out and see if it works. For me, it really helps to get to that meditative state quicker because my brain is already like, oh, okay, we're doing this. When I do put things in place that are repetitive and my mind and my subconscious knows what's happening every single time I do it. And then lastly, the biggest tip that I have for mind calming exercises is to not get annoyed at yourself. As you practice, you will find that you have these intrusive thoughts and they will enter your mind and they will take over your entire focus. And instead of getting really angry with yourself and just saying, that's it, I can't do it, and backing out, instead, the way I find to do it is to acknowledge that that intrusive thought is there and then shake your head and distance yourself from it. And then go, okay, so I just had an intrusive thought, let's carry on anyway. And you let that thought go. And then you keep going. And if you have another intrusive thought, you go, okay, that is another intrusive thought. I need to let that go. And you let it go. So I personally find that shaking my head is a really good technique for this. It might not work for everyone. But for me, my brain, I always think of it a bit like an etch-a-sketcher. I don't know if any of you remember those. But every time an intrusive thought comes into my mind, I shake my head to like erase it and then let it move on. And that technique could work as well. But just don't get annoyed at yourself. I have met so many people that try to use meditation or mind calming practices and they get really, really annoyed if a single intrusive thought happens. But the reality is that our minds are constantly running, and so you are going to have intrusive thoughts. The intrusive thought isn't the problem, it's how you deal with it. It's finding the solution that works best for you. So for me, it's shaking my head like an etch-a-sketcher, erasing that thought and just allowing it to pass over me again, and then just continuing on. So the exercises. Let's start with one of the most well-known techniques that most people will learn at some point while doing this, and this is breath counting. Now, when it comes to entering these calm states, a lot of people will use breath as a focus point for the mind. So instead of allowing yourself to focus on the thoughts that are going past, instead you're like waving a little rattle in front of your face and you are trying to distract yourself from these thoughts. Now, this can be a really good starting technique to get you into that state because it means instead of focusing on not focusing, you're instead focusing on something else. So a really common way to do it is to quieten your space around you, sit really comfortably, and then you're going to want to count in breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold your breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. People will often do this in sets of 12. So you'll do it 12 times. And then you'll just allow yourself to sit in this calm place and just see how long you can sit until a thought comes by. And if a thought comes by, do whatever action you need to shake it off and just allow it to pass you by. And by doing this, you essentially step yourself into this calming place. Every time you do a set of 16, so every time you take in a breath, hold it and release it again, you're taking yourself a step further into this calm mental place. Now you can do this as many steps as you need. Some people will only need 3 steps, some might need 6, some might need 10, 12, 20. Just don't give yourself too many steps. If you're at, say, like the 25, 30 mark and you're still really struggling, take a breather. This shouldn't be something that you're forcing yourself to do for like an hour and a half every single day and it's taking up so much of your time. Instead, just 5 minutes of your time, even if you don't end up at the point where you want to be, it can be a really good start just to practice getting yourself even halfway to a calm state and then coming back again. So typically with this, I will breathe in through the nose, breathe out through the mouth. This is a pretty well-known technique for calming breathing, especially for anyone who has panic attacks and that kind of thing like I do. I often find that breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth is a really good way to kind of calm that action. It stops the kind of haggard breathing that I think a lot of people struggle with. So you take it in through the nose for 4, hold it for 4, out through the mouth for 4, and then hold it for 4. And then you start again, and then the cycle repeats itself. And essentially this is a way to slowly step yourself into this quietened place, this calmer mind. Now this technique works for a lot of people. Now the use of breath is such a powerful technique when it comes to entering in a calmer state of mind. It is well known that the amount of oxygen that we have in our system, or the lack thereof, changes the way our minds function. So this breathing technique of controlled breathing is actually really successful when it comes to calming the mind. Now there's lots of other ways that you can do similar techniques. Another one is that instead of counting your breath, instead you're going to be following it in and out again. Now the process of this is that as you breathe in, you fill your lungs from the bottom to the top. Now people often refer to this as vase breathing, where you start and you fill that vase from the bottom, the vase being your lungs, and so you take very deep, still, slow breaths to slowly fill up your lungs, and then you allow it to leave from the top and work down. So you fill it from the bottom and you drain it from the top. And this technique is really good if you want to focus on yourself. So rather than distracting yourself with numbers, if you do struggle with numbers, you can try this vase breathing technique that I find really, really successful. The idea being is, same again, you breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And you're going to want to focus on where that breath is going. A lot of people will breathe up here. It's almost like corset breathing, where you feel as though you can't fill the bottom part of your lungs. And this is largely done, especially by women, I find, because we have this ever-present need to like suck in. I don't know if you know that feeling, but you feel the need to suck in your stomach. But when you suck in your stomach, you limit how deeply you can breathe. And so in this, don't suck in your stomach. Don't worry about it. No one's going to care. Instead, you're going to want to fill the lungs from the bottom. So you're going to feel the air going in and you want to focus on where it's going and slowly fill up and then slowly let it go again. So the main way to tell if you're doing this vase breathing technique right is if when you're breathing in, your stomach distends. That is you breathing in and allowing it to sink quite deeply. A lot of people typically breathe up here. And so the top portion of your chest rises and falls. But it's very unusual to find the bottom portion moving unless you're doing heavy exercise, which is often the only time this will happen. So this is a really good technique. Allow that air to fill your lungs, hold, and then let it out again, and use this technique to see if that works. Now for me, I don't find that this works as well personally as other techniques, but obviously everyone is going to be different, and so different people are going to have different successes with different practices. So this vase breathing technique is really good for people who like feeling in themselves. They like feeling their breath moving, they like knowing where it is. It's good for people that like staying very grounded, that like being within themselves. Now there's another technique that is instead trying to allow us to be other places. Now this is a good technique if you do want to get into journeying, lucid dreaming. It's good for training visualization and also for people who are just generally good at visualization. The idea behind this is that you're going to want to put yourself in a calming environment. So we're going to be working with the elements for this one because I've spent a lot of time working elemental magic and it's a really good way to help connect us to the earth as well. So not only are we experiencing visualization techniques and the calming of imagination, but we're also helping to connect to the world around us by the use of the elements. So what I will typically start is I will start in the same comfortable position. But this time I won't typically be using music because I find that distracts me from visualization. Instead, I want to be in my imagination. That is the purpose of this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the same breathing technique from the first one. So we're going to be breathing in for 4, holding for 4, then releasing for 4, and holding for 4. And then the cycle repeats itself. Except on every repetition, we are going to be putting ourselves into a different elemental cozy space. So for this, you can choose whatever cozy space works for you. So for me, when it comes to earth, I am sitting in a beautiful woodland. I have got my bare feet on the ground. It's springtime. There's bluebells everywhere. I can hear the birds chirping. The squirrels are running around in the trees. That is my happy, calm place for earth. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be cycling through the elements. So we're going to be starting with earth. So figure out what your happy place is going to be for earth. And then we're going into air. So for me, air is standing on the top of a beautiful hill overlooking a village and the wind is blowing past and there's wildflowers everywhere. That is my happy place for air. Then we move to fire. Now for me, fire is a lovely cozy wooden cabin with a log fire and comfy cozy blankets and cushions and books and hot chocolate. That is my happy place for fire. And then finally moving on to water, it is sitting on a beautiful tropical beach with my feet in the water and the tide is like washing up around me and it's gloriously sunny. These are the happy places that I imagine as we go through each cycle. Now you could use these happy places or you can think of your own depending on your own memories, your own enjoyment. You know, if for you being outside and the earth element is about a beautiful frosty morning, go for that. Work with whatever your happy place is with each of the elements. So the way we're going to do this is instead of counting to 4, we are going to be repeating earth, air, fire, water in our minds. So we're going to be going earth, air, fire, water. And in our mind, we are visualizing where we want to be while we take that breath in. We hold it, we release it. And then we're switching to the next element, air. And we're going to be seeing ourselves in these beautiful, beautiful places wherever we end up going. And then we're switching to fire. And we're going to switch up the imagery that we use. And then lastly to water. And then you can repeat this cycle. Now, if you need more time in each place, you can do a 4 rotation for each element. So you can do 4 in and out breaths for each element, allowing you to spend a little bit more time within that peaceful, happy place before you move on to somewhere else. And this can be really good if you are starting your meditation and you're not quite certain on how well you're going to succeed. Spending 4 breaths in a specific visualization can be a really good tool because it allows us just to spend a little bit more time immersed in these worlds. And you'll often find that if it's really a happy, calm environment, you'll actually almost lose track of time while you're in there. And this can also be really good if you're planning on connecting with a specific elemental, if you're planning on working with a certain element in a spell or ritual that you're going to be doing. So for instance, if you are going to be doing a creativity spell and you are going to be working with the element of fire, spending the entire meditation in your fire element safe space is a really good way to start connecting to the fire element subconsciously before you even begin the spell or ritual. Same with if you are doing a healing technique or an emotional technique, you might want to be in your aquatic water element world for a little while longer than the others if you do want to be working with that element in that ritual. Now, you don't have to use the elements for this, but I find a lot of people will find it relatively easy to work with the elements because most of us have experienced them within our day-to-day lives. If you do have another happy place that you would like to go to instead, then that is definitely an option as well. Simply change up how you do it. Now, the last technique that is a really active technique that I can show you on here is the one that I use when it comes to spellwork and ritual. I also use this before I do journeying. I will do this at night if I can't sleep. I'll also do this before divination if I feel like my mind is a little bit too chaotic. So this technique, instead of focusing on the action of breathing itself, it focuses on the inaction. So it focuses on the in-betweens, the point after you've taken in a breath and before you release it, once you've released it and before you take it in again. They're the lulls between pendulum swings. And it's the weirdest sensation. I think the only way I can describe it is a little like free fall. I don't know if everyone will have experienced this. I hate roller coasters, but the best way I can describe it is that moment after you've stopped going up and you start going down and everything feels like it floats. That is the feeling that you end up getting when you are working with these in-betweens of breath. Just after a breath, before you let it go, it's this like teetering moment of inaction. This moment where the pendulum stops swinging from breathing in to breathing out. Instead, it just still. It's this strange stillness. And that is what I focus on. So I breathe completely normally. I don't take in ridiculously deep breaths or completely shallow breaths because you don't want to hyperventilate. Instead, you just breathe exactly as you would normally breathe. But you focus your mind on these in-between moments, these liminal times between breath in and breath out. And it leads to this strange feeling of inaction. It's very, very bizarre. I can't describe it unless you've worked with it yourself. I would recommend giving it a go though if the breathing techniques don't work for you, because this action of stillness, you are not focusing on anything and it just allows your mind to be so calm. But this can take time and it can feel really, really weird. So if you are struggling with the sensation of not breathing, then stick with the counting of breaths to start off with. Because for some people, the focusing on the inaction of breathing can be really unnerving and it can make people feel kind of uncomfortable. So play around with different techniques, see what works best for you. Now, the other techniques for calming the mind are less breath related. So the first is the use of focus points. Now this is typically done on candle flames, but it can also be done just generally. One of the ways that I find it to be really, really effective is if I have dim light and a single candle, I will be able to zone out almost entirely while looking at this candle. And I am neither focusing on the candle nor am I focusing on the thoughts in my own mind. Instead, I'm in this strange absence of thought that is really calming and relaxing. The other way is what's known as a gaze. Now, gazes are used in lots of different forms of magical practice. A lot of them are used purposefully. The one I personally use for mind calming can also be used to sense spirits. So if you do want to work with both spirit communication and interaction with the fae and with shades and ancestors and those kind of things, and you also want to work mind calming, this could be a good option for you. The idea being that you don't focus on anything with your eyes. And it's a really strange thing to get used to doing, and it can take some time. So our eyes are constantly searching for something to focus on. The goal is to have something in focus. But what you need to learn to do is to unfocus. Now, I don't know if you can tell that I just did anything, but there are now 2 cameras sitting in front of me instead of 1. I'm no longer focusing on anything that is currently in front of me. If I put my hand right in front of me here, that is actually where I'm focusing, this far away from me. Whereas the camera, which is 2 feet away from me, is out of focus. So the way I typically do it is I just relax my eyes. Now, it might be a case that you need to have something here. You need to be focusing on something right in front of your face and then move it. And don't allow your eyes to focus on whatever is behind it. And this state is a little bit unusual. I wouldn't recommend holding it for extended periods of time, but for very brief mind calming, especially if you're in a crowded place, I find it can be really, really useful. If I'm really struggling and I need to calm my mind because I'm freaking out inside, I'll often use this technique just for like 30 seconds. It's not one of these techniques that you're going to be doing for 20, 30 minutes. Just 30 seconds to a minute of just allowing yourself to not focus on anything. And it just allows you to almost take a step back from the mundane world. It allows you to focus away from the world. Instead, you're focusing on the sheer lack of focus, the ability to not be paying attention to anything in particular. And this is why it's really good for interacting with spirits as well. A lot of the time, spirits will interact with the edges of our vision. And because we're always focusing on whatever is right in front of us, we may miss the interactions that are happening around us because we aren't paying attention to it. The use of this lack of focus is that we are then able to focus on any thoughts that are coming in from other sources, any imagery that seems strange, spirits interacting with you visually that typically you would have overlooked because you were focusing on whatever is in front of you. And then the last technique that I find exceptionally useful is guided meditation. Now, guided meditation is a really fantastic way if you struggle with everything else. If you have so many intrusive thoughts, so many emotions running around inside your mind that you find it almost impossible to let that go and allow yourself to just be calm in your own mind, then guided meditations can be really useful. Similar to the technique of using imagination to transport ourselves to our happy, calm places, the use of guided meditation can be really good if you struggle to come up with your own imaginative visuals, if you struggle to find a place that you feel comfortable to be in, and or if the same intrusive thoughts are continuously bombarding you even if you're in your happy, calm place, then guided meditations can be really good. The goal of guided meditation is it calms the mind by giving you something specific to focus on. So rather than you creating the imagery for yourself, someone else is giving you the imagery that you can then follow. They usually take you on a journey and it slowly drops you into a meditative state so that at the end of that journey, when you've reached the destination of the guided meditation, they then give you a period of time where you can sit in the space that they have created for you, that you can be in that meditative, that calm place, and then they'll take you back out of it again. Now, guided meditations are typically longer than the other meditations that I've spoken about, so they can be really good if you do have 45 minutes, an hour and a half to set aside, because when it comes to guided meditations, it's always good to actually finish it. Don't pull yourself out halfway through because your mind is still halfway to the destination that you gave it and you've just ripped it away. So typically it's a case of sitting down and letting the meditation run all the way through, and they will give you the techniques to get out of it again, which is really useful. I will go over some of these techniques at the end of this video so that you know how to do that if you're in your own kind of imaginative headspace, if you do struggle to pull yourself back to reality. But these techniques are really good. For about 10 years, these kind of guided meditations were all that I was able to do because my brain was so chaotic. There were so many emotions and thoughts and fears and irrational imagery, and I really, really struggled to get rid of it. And the only technique that I found that would work for a long time were guided meditations. Now I use this in-between breath technique. Now, when it comes to guided meditations, it's really important not to settle for the first one that you hear. If you don't like the person's voice, you're going to really struggle. If you find the imagery to be really, really stressful, you might also really struggle with it. So for me personally, I typically stick to soft male voices, and they're often aquatic in nature. But if you find that the soft male voice is really annoying, you might find that a female voice or a softer voice or a firmer voice might work best for you. And if you have a fear of the ocean and open water, the same meditations that work for me might not work for you. So really play around with it. It might take you weeks till you find a guided meditation instructor that you find is really, really good. There are so many channels on YouTube that you can use for this, and I have been asked several times to do guided meditations. I don't know why. I think my voice is really, really grating, but apparently some people would like me to do guided meditations. So let me know if that's the kind of thing that you would like to do, because I've got some fantastic guided meditations that I use myself that I think could be really good for everyone else. But I find my voice really annoying, so if you don't find it annoying, let me know if that's something that you'd be interested in. Now, the last topic to discuss is how do you get yourself back again? A lot of people, when they're really deep into these meditations, particularly the imaginative meditations and the guided meditations, they may struggle to feel wholly there for a while. They're often off floating in the clouds somewhere. And although this can be a really, really nice feeling, if you do have to get back to work, if you do have to do the school run with the kids, it might not be the best option, because being in that floaty headspace is not the best when you need to be doing important things in your actual day job, or when picking up the kids, or when looking after the dog. You know, you really need to be present. And so how can you get back to the present? A few ways that I find really, really helpful is to do a flow technique. So the idea behind this is that you allow each bit of your body to move, working your way down all the way to your footsies. Because typically when you're in meditation or when you're in these mind calming states, you're up here, you're in your head, you're focusing all around here and here. And so when you need to get back, you're going to work from up here all the way down to your footsies. So I typically start by rolling my neck around. I'll then start rolling my shoulders. I'll then do a little bit of a wavesy with my handsies. I'll then move my hips in circles. I'll wiggle my legs, and then I'll wiggle my toes. And this is a really good way to kind of get yourself back to, I am present, I am here, I am in myself, in my body. I am not floating around somewhere in my own mind. And that's a really good way of doing it. Now, some people will stomp their feet. This is something I see practiced a lot. It's this kind of, I am here, I am grounded, I can feel the earth kind of an action. And it's actually very stress reducing as well. If you've had a really, really bad day, stomp like a toddler, and suddenly everything feels better because you're getting out all of that energy and you're really connecting yourself back to the earth again. In regards to connecting to the earth, another good technique is to go out for a walk. This is a good way of really connecting ourselves with time and place. You see where the sun is, you see what the weather is doing, you feel the cold air on your face or the warm air depending on where you live. You know, you're feeling the rain, you are just feeling your sense of place. And that's a really good way to get you back again. For anyone that likes food, any foodies out there, eating food is a really, really good way of doing it. This comes to all spiritual techniques. Remus Lupin had something right. Eat chocolate. Or just have a good meal after you've come out of meditation. Have a snack. I always have a snack afterwards because otherwise I feel a little bit like I'm floating off for the rest of the day, and that is not really what I want. The other technique that I find quite useful is the use of centering and grounding. I have a full video on centering and grounding, and I find this technique really good because I go from up here in my headspace, and then I center myself back down into my core, and then I ground myself back down to the earth again, and that's a really good way to get myself back. The last thing that people will often do is they might have a bit of a dance around. Dance is a really good way to get us back in connection with our own bodies again. You don't even have to like full on dance if you aren't capable of doing that. Just have a little bit of a boogie, you know, just a little bit of a sing-song with your favorite artist. For me, it is like Machine Gun Kelly. Just having a bit of a jam to Machine Gun Kelly after I've finished my like mind calming techniques. And that's a really good way to ground ourselves again because we are aware of ourselves, our body, our actions. It gives us a little boost of energy again if you do need to, do the school run or finish an assignment or study for that exam. It's a really good way of doing that. But equally, if you are just about to go to sleep and you're using these mind calming techniques to assist you with sleep, try doing these techniques in the morning once you've woken up again, because otherwise you're going to be countering the purpose of the mind calming techniques. But to finish all of this off, let's just get back to the main focus here, and that is not to focus. If you do have intrusive thoughts coming in, don't get angry with yourself. Don't give up entirely on all of these practices. It is going to come with time. With all of this, nothing is instantaneous. Some people might have an easier time with these techniques than other people. Some people may find that none of these techniques work for them and they need to find something else, and that is completely valid as well. It can take time to find something that works, but as someone who really struggled with these techniques for a really long time, these are the ones that I have found to be personally effective, particularly the visualization techniques. I find them to be really good for getting myself into that calm state before spell work and ritual, because that way it allows me to better focus on the visualization I am creating for that spell. It helps me better focus on trance states if I do intend to use them. It generally just helps me feel clearer in my mind before I do spellwork and ritual. And ultimately, the times where I have taken the time to do these practices before spellwork and ritual, I have actually found that I have more successful results. Because when I've done these, I find that I tend to stay in this very calm, clear space for a good long while afterwards, which allows me to do that spellwork and ritual in this very positive space. And ultimately, I do find that I get better results when I don't have the intrusive thoughts. And so it could be well worth it if you are struggling with spellwork and ritual and getting results. Doing these kind of techniques could really help you if you are struggling. So I know that this has been a very long video. Thank you for sticking with me. Unfortunately, there isn't much changing of camera angles that I can do when it comes to talking about mind calming, because it's all in the mind. It's just a case of practice and sticking with it. If you did enjoy this video, feel free to give it a like. It really, really means so much to me. I will try to put some guided meditation videos in the description box by a bunch of different people. See if you like them, try different ones out. Some of them are going to be the people that I personally listen to. Others are going to be people that I find don't work for me, but they might work for you depending on what you want out of a guided meditation instructor, that was the word I was after. So I will try to put some of those down in the description box as well. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community, feel free to put a comment down in the comment section. We do also have a Discord server, the link is in the description box, where you can talk about your magical and meditative and mind clearing techniques. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I do try my best to post magical content every single week. So I hope you guys are all staying safe. I hope you're all having a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!